Oh no, I am delving into a topic that I'm pretty sure the Smash community is tired of hearing about. We're talking about Bayonetta, bans and what should happen. But overall, I don't want to really just focus on like Bayonetta as a character, but I want to just talk about, well, um, what makes something bannable? Because we ban stages, we in the Smash community, we banned like team comps before when Sheik and Game and Watch were super broken in Smash 4 with the bucket thing. Then we've done some instances in the past of banning team compositions, but from what I'm aware of, we really haven't banned a character for too long. I know that we had a Mennonite ban in Brawl, but aside from that, we really haven't had much. And so I don't really want to talk about Bayonetta specifically, but I want to just kind of like talk about the framework we should have in determining ultimately whether or not something is worth banning, or and if they are truly worth whether a character is bannable at the end of the day. Now, we've had instances in the fighting game community where characters are banned. Broken King of Fighters bosses are banned, from my knowledge. Super Turbo Akuma was soft banned in Japan, and I believe was banned in America. So there's some precedent here and there. And if we look at other um, MOBAs or other esports, if a character or champion is just so overpowered, usually what happens is they get banned temporarily in competitive, or they release a hot fix to fix the numbers so that they're not broken for competitive play. Or, with MOBAs, they also have the luxury of banning characters too. So if something's too OP, then they have now 10 bans that they can use to make sure that player's not played in the current meta. Now, for me, I'm more likely going to talk from the player's perspective of what's banworthy. It's not to dismiss whether or not whether the viewer or other stakeholders in the community are important, but I want to just fully disclose that my biases in the perspective that I have here comes from being a player and playing the game. So with that being said, usually what I look at in terms of character balance and whether or not something fair is David Sterling's play to win is basically my mantra. You adapt, you figure things out, and or you just, if you don't want to play that, then you just move on. If somebody complains, I've grown up in a culture of saying no Johns, you just got to play better. And so that's always been my attitude. And admittedly, I have not played Smash 4. I don't know the pain of playing against Bayonetta and getting killed at like when you have a big lead. So for me, I admittedly don't empathize with you guys in that way. So for me, all in all, it really does take a lot for me personally to try to ban something. I just imagine all the countless times when in Melee, through its 16-year history, where we've had certain characters that were really strong. And I imagine like if we had that attitude for Melee during the developmental stages of the meta and people discovering things, and we decide, oh, this is too cheap, we're going to ban it, then we wouldn't have figured out solutions to things and had a richer meta even today. Even like in 2014, 2013, when we kind of made the memes about Fox being the best character, and I believe at DU Fox with it, 5 of the top 6 players were all Foxes. A lot of people were like, well, okay, I guess Fox is the best character, like there's no hope and it's going to create an overly centralized meta. But a lot of other characters continue to develop technology against Foxes, so that it would have looked kind of silly, looking back, if we ever thought that Fox was broken enough that he was ban-worthy. Now, Bayonetta is a little bit different in these cases, and I'd like to really kind of address what I think in terms of like who is like the most visible characters are the ones that are in the top and doing the best. And I think in terms of how we feel about the characters, it really boils down to 4 things. Like, A, are they fun to fight against? B, are they fun to play? Like, is there like a sense of respect for playing the character that we go like, okay, yeah, this character has a lot of stuff, but I understand it takes a lot of skill to play. I believe that Melee Fox falls into this category because although Fox is seen as the best character, a lot of people have respect for how Fox functions and how difficult it is to play Fox. He's prone to getting chain grabbed, 0 to death comboed, and just getting a lot of damage for just really small mistakes. So the threshold for Playing well and making mistakes is very small for Fox, and especially with a lot of characters that know how to combo Fox very well. The other two things that really factor into like whether or not we like a character being in the top tier, showing a lot of representation at tournaments, is also is the character fun to watch? And with Bayonetta, it's debatable. I think from an outsider's perspective, I do believe Bayonetta brings a lot of tension to a match, and especially I think like the FGC guys probably think Bayonetta's hype because of like the zero to death combos, and the FGC see their own like absurd techniques with like Marvel and broken combos and infinites. They're like used to that kind of stuff, and they probably think it's hype because they know at any given moment there's a sense of tension with Bayo, where if even if Bayo's at like 120%, like you know that Bayo can still win the game. Now, from a player standpoint, I can understand why that's total bullshit. To have to deal with that stress of playing a two-stock game, you're playing really well, and all of a sudden you get sent to the side, or you know some hit happens and you lose, even though you had like a 100% lead. You're like at 10%, they're at 150. You just needed one more hit, but they somehow got a hit to kill you first, and I can understand that's like very frustrating. And I know for people who are enthusiastic about the game, they can be really jaded and be like, okay, this doesn't feel fair. And I think the last thing is also that's really important is the frequency of how often this character appears in top 8s. And I'll tell you this, whether or not it's Bayo or another character, like I feel that any character that's overrepresented in top 8s at majors is always going to be an issue with the Reddit, the Twitch, the Twitter audiences, because people like variety. And if you even if you have like the coolest character in the game with the coolest mechanics, if you see that and that's like the only thing you see in top 8, like let's say there's a really cool character but 7 out of the top 8 players all play the same character, regardless of who that character is, people are going to have issue with that because it's repetitive. People aren't going to see that as very fun. So even Fox versus Fox in the heyday of 2014, where like everybody seemed to be picking Fox, Hax was picking Fox, everybody was changing to Fox, you know, a lot of people didn't really find it fun because we just saw a lot of Fox dittos and we saw Fox left and right. So I think those are the 4 factors in like watchability. Are they fun to play? Are they fun to fight? Are they fun to watch? And how often do we see this character on screen? With that being said, in terms of if we're going to bring this discussion back to Bayonetta, I don't personally have the statistics, but my gut tells me that Bayonetta is nowhere near the level of representation of Meta Knight in Brawl. If you looked at Marvel vs. Capcom 2 with the top 4 characters in the game, or if you look at Third Strike with Chun and Yoon, I don't think Bayonetta reaches anywhere near that level of representation like it did for those other characters. So for people who are like, oh yeah, Bayonetta is ruining the meta, like there's a high frequency of Bayonetta, I'm not sure of the data per se, but ultimately I do not, unless somebody can prove me wrong, I really don't think Bayonetta is overly represented. So the frequency argument's not there. I think this really comes down to people are fatigued by watching. They don't really feel like it's fair to watch what Bayonetta does on screen off of small mistakes. And I imagine that a lot of low and mid-level players feel very frustrated playing against Bayonetta. I think the closest analogy I can give is a low to mid-level player, like let's say they're just below the Arcadian threshold of being ranked, and they have to suffer week after week playing against ice climbers and getting wobbled for every small mistake. I imagine that could be a very frustrating experience. So overall, when we look at the cases here, there's 2, I think, audiences that feel slighted by the existence of Bayo and the fact that she's not banned. The lower to mid-level players who go to the tournaments, the pot fillers, probably feel very frustrated getting killed at low percentages, and dealing with it and getting eliminated, and it doesn't feel like a fair experience, similar to how wobbling exists in Melee. And I've always just said get good, but I can't really empathize there. So I don't think that reason alone is worth banning. If the low to mid-level players feel like they can't really do much. And there's also the audience, too, that feels like Bayonetta is unfair. I think with those 2 combined, those are probably the 2 most marginalized audiences here within, or marginalized stakeholders within the community that feel cheated by the fact that Bayonetta exists. Now, do I feel like it's a banworthy in this, in light of this? I really do not say so. I don't think he Bayonetta over centralizes the meta enough. And for people that, I think the elephant under the room is we're all looking for kind of scapegoats to why Smash 4 is dying. We're going like, oh, it's all because of Bayo. It's all because of this. If this one issue that came up last tournament doesn't get fixed, then Smash 4 is dead. But I think there is another elephant in the room that people aren't realizing. The fact of the matter is that outside of Bayonetta, Smash 4 viewership has been on the decline, and I don't mean to bash Smash 4, and it's not because of Bayonetta that people are leaving the scene. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for it. A lot of people, there are storylines, but they're not being shared very well. It was a new game in the beginning, and now it's lost some of its luster, and people move on to the next newest thing. But for people to attribute Smash 4's decline in viewership and maybe attendance to Bayonetta seems to be wrong, and to use Bayonetta as a scapegoat to say, if we ban Bayonetta, this is going to solve the Smash 4 issues, seems a little bit weird. I don't think it's true. Once again, I could be wrong. I'm kind of an outsider looking in the scene. But I also think that if we're going to ban characters based on what low to mid-level players think or what an audience thinks, in like a kind of point of the meta, I think it sets dangerous precedences for the community, because if you get rid of Bayonetta, it's kind of a slippery slope. I acknowledge that it could be seen as a fallacy. We don't really know what happens to the ecosystem of the meta. If you get rid of Bayo, what happens? Do we find another character that just over-centralized by the lack of Bayo? That character becomes a new overpowered character, and Bayo was the only one that was preventing the floodgates from opening. We kind of saw this in Brawl, and what happened in Brawl, I believe, is that created the meta that happened was it indirectly came from Meta Knight, but what happened was because Meta Knight was so oppressive on a lot of stages, we had to ban a lot of the stages because Meta Knight existed. But because we banned a lot of the stages, we had a lot of stages that were really good for ice climbers, and it created a lot of indirect nerfs to other characters, and it eventually created a meta where Meta Knight and Ice Climbers were like the two relevant characters. And granted, there are other characters that are good, and the meta seems to be a little bit different for Brawl in 2017, 2018. But just because we solved one issue here, if we banned Bayonetta based on viewership, like, what if it's Cloud or Diddy or Sheik? That's the next character that everyone seems like, oh yeah, Smash 4 is just Diddy Kong, or Smash 4 is just Sheik. I'm not saying that will happen, but do you ban characters because they over-centralize, because they appear in too many top 8s? If that's the sole reason why like a character should be banned, I think that's really dangerous to do. And then, because if you ban Bayo here and other characters come to the limelight, whether it's because the players that lose to Bayo are just really good and it over-centralizes to other characters, then there might be complaints down the road that this other character becomes too popular. And so I think Smash 4 has a bunch of other issues. I think the fact that everybody complains about Bayo, and that Smash Twitter and Smash Reddit has literally been non-stop Bayo threads, and granted, I'm not really helping in this situation, I think is killing the perception of Smash 4 and even Smash in general more than Bayonetta itself. It's more the people complaining about Bayonetta and complaining about Bayo, like I'm doing right now, that will kill Smash faster than Bayo itself. And that's my firm belief in anything. Because if you look at it as like an outsider, let's say you're an outsider that you like Smash, maybe you follow other esports, but you also watch Smash on the side, and you follow your favorite players and community leaders, and you're on Twitter, and all you see is Bayo this, Bayo that. I imagine there's probably like not a majority percent, but there's probably a decent amount of people who in the past couple of days have muted, unfollowed, and who are just like, you know what, is this a Smash community? Or do they just like complaining all the time? I'm not really interested. I'm like losing interest because it's all just about complaining about the latest thing. And so that's what I believe that also loses a lot of people too. There's not really a metric on it. So all in all, I think what would be good in the future is we collect data I think it's really cool that Tweak and Kitaro and other people have showed techniques that they can share to newer players or to players in general, and what they could be doing to do better against Bayonetta. Because from my understanding, it doesn't seem like people are fully optimized against Bayo. And I'm not just talking about like SDIing. I've watched the Kitaro video, and it seems like there's a lot more things that people could be doing to play the matchup better. And if in a few months we still see a lot of issues and Bayo becomes more popular, and even with this game knowledge, Bayos are still on top, then maybe it's worth a discussion. But I think any kind of discussion of a ban is premature, and those are my kind of thoughts on this matter.